there were other dimensions of disgust that I know you researched, and one was, I saw, let's see, what was it? It was the relationship, I think, between disgust sensitivity, maybe that's the right way of putting it, and political orientation.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is something, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier in the episode the replication crisis, and it's definitely made, I think, any reasonable psychologist, who's especially social psychologist, wonder about whether their effects are real. And some of the experimental effects that we've reported, like I'm doubtful about some of the stuff that I've shown in the lab, because I don't think it was, knowing what I know now, I just don't think we did it right. But this relationship between disgust sensitivity, which is in a nutshell, an individual difference. So some people really are grossed out super easily and some people not at all. And as with any psychological trait, and with most things, there's a nice distribution, bell-shaped distribution. Some people really are super grossed out. So all I have to do for some people is show a picture, for me, for instance, of like a knee wound, like an infected knee
Really?
wound. And I've seen people in my audience gag, right? People might gag from hearing something. So then that's one end of the continuum. On the other end of the continuum, you have people who just doesn't bother them at all. Like, in fact, they take some delight from it. And of course, most people are somewhere, Dahmer, right? Of course, most people are somewhere in the middle there. So you can measure this. Like, there are a number of different questionnaire style measures. And, it's important to say that if some are better than others, but if you ask people a bunch of questions about how they would feel in any number of situations that could be disgusting. So if you ask people, imagine that you were walking through a railroad tunnel and you smell urine, how disgusted would you be? You get people to say like 0 to 5, how disgusted would you be? You ask them a bunch of those questions, you get a fairly reliable estimate. Of course, there are domain differences, which we can get to in a second. But if you take that general score, if I ask you 30 things that could be disgusting and your answers, some people are in the 4s and 5s every time. Some people are in the 1s and 2s. Now, if I bring you into the lab and I ask you to do gross things, your scores on those measures actually predict fairly reliably whether or not you'll do those. So these questionnaires do seem to be picking up on a real behavioral difference and a real difference in the way that people respond to gross things. Now, if you give those measures that are just, again, about physical disgust, like imagine that you see a dirty, like an unflushed toilet that's not yours. Imagine that you touch some vomit, like all kinds of stuff. It turns out that is reliably, now it's small, and I'll emphasize that again when I come back to the results. It's a small relationship, but it's a reliable relationship between how easily disgusted you are and your political orientation on the left-right dimension, such that people who report being more easily disgusted tend to be more politically conservative. And then the converse is true. People who aren't that easily disgusted, more likely to be liberal. For anybody who cares to know like the estimate of the effect size, it's like 0.2. So it's not explaining a whole lot of
That's
the
still
variance.
pretty big.
It's a reliable one. Now, importantly, when we first found this, Yoel Imbar and I and Paul Bloom published this paper like in 2013 or something. I wasn't sure, like we're using a small sample, not small, but a limited sample of college students, 2 different colleges. We expanded it. We looked at a nationally representative sample in the United States. We tried to measure a bunch of other stuff like personality variables to rule out confounds like third variables that might explain both of these things. Ever since we've started looking at this, we see it emerge no matter where we look. Now we've looked at it in like 30 different countries using measures in different languages. People in other labs have looked at it. People have, tried to account for potential third variables that might explain for it. Seems as if this is a real thing. And I think it makes sense. I think that one of the things that it means to be more conservative is to have a higher suspicion, behavioral suspicion, alertness against things that might actually be potentially dangerous. That is why, what it means to be conservative is you're going to explore less. You're going to try different dishes less. So the old ways are reliable. So stick to the old ways. So the explanation that we favor is that one of the many things that might go into determining whether or not you're going to be left or right on the political spectrum is something like your emotional set point for, in particular, risk for pathogens. So when you look at cultures that are more sexually conservative, and this isn't my work, this is work that people have done, they tend to have emerged in places where there was a higher pathogen load historically. Cultures just tend to get more conservative if they emerged in areas that had more disease around them. Not whether they have currently more disease, but yeah.
I'm now trying to think what the immediate cultural conditions were after the Black Plague.
Oh yeah, right. I don't know, but people did get quite moralistic after that, I think. It must have been such a crazy time to see. On the other hand, people adapt really easily and well. So, people maybe just got used to it. So one of the things that I often say is, you might be high or low in disgust sensitivity. That doesn't mean that you can't get used to certain things. So if you just have to be a pooper scooper for dogs in a park, after a while, dog poop is going to stop grossing you out. That's just how human beings work, right? That's how animals work. We habituate. But in general, like your general tendency doesn't seem to change. Yeah. So anyway, back to the replication thing. That's the one finding that I am convinced is actually true. Now, whether or not we've ruled out all of the alternative explanations, I'm not sure. But it seems no matter how we measure and where we measure it, people will often ask, like, is the left-right dimension, isn't that cultural? Of course, there is some way in which that is, but there's also a way that generally people agree on what it means to be to the right. So the word conservative is kind of confusing because it doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean the same thing in lots of countries. But whatever that tendency is, like that seems to be a reliable dimension across the political spectrum, no matter where you look as well.